One is a harrowing, if sometimes trite, story of revenge and protection of one's family. The other is a more intense remake by Martin Scorsese. Let's hope it goes better than the last one. Cape Fear, They Remade It. Hi, and welcome back to another episode of They Remade It. I'm your host, Stuart.
And I'm your host, Jacob.
I have decided to be inordinately cozy this rainy evening. I have a full blanket on me. I have a mug of hot chocolate. My dog is not at my feet, but near it. Just enjoying this winter weather before it slowly disappears and I have to start worrying about allergies again.
That's always my favorite time of the year is allergy season because I get to go from having sore throats and congestion to just not being able to breathe properly. I like being cozy. I'm being cozy right now too. I turned off the heating in my house so that it wouldn't interrupt with the recording, and I'm eating cold carrots out of a Tupperware container.
You live in such a fantastical way that sometimes I find it hard to believe.
You've seen how I live.
Yeah, it's nice, but just what you just described is, it sounds like you live like a French peasant.
No, we are all doing fine.
I have run out of firewood, and so I must eat these cold carrots alone.
Boo-hoo, boo-hoo. No bread on my plate, though. If I was a true peasant, I would have stolen some already.
I'm going to avoid the inevitable Les Miserables references.
Yeah, this isn't the Les Mis episode.
Anyway, spoilers.
Spoilers for something that has not been planned.
Right. Guess suppose we can go into what we've been watching/consuming, and I'll actually take it from the top on this one just because I have an easy list.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing. The last several weeks have gone by like a whirl, and truly I sat down getting ready to get all set up for all this, and it was like, okay, it's time to think back on what I've been doing, what I've been watching, what I've been playing. I, for the life of me, cannot remember a single thing I did or watched other than the movies for today. It has been, I don't, like, genuinely, now I'm thinking back on it, I'm like, what did I do with all my time? I have no idea. I genuinely, the last few weeks, for some reason, I've been basically in a fugue state. Like, my dad came down and we visited family, but that didn't involve watching any movies or anything. We just kind of hung out. Like, otherwise, the time, because we're on a slightly tighter gap since we were just adjusting for time and stuff, but like, I don't know. I genuinely don't know if I've actually done anything.
We watched Nashville.
We watched Nashville, yes. We did do that, at least.
That's the one thing that we did because we had to skip a week. Everyone was busy.
Yeah.
Either with family or rehearsals or presumably watching the Supers Bowls.
Yeah, that genuinely might be it, is Nashville, that we watched for movie night again. Well, not that we watched on movie night again, not that we watched the movie for a second time or something. Anyway, mm-hmm. Nashville was good. I enjoyed the Nashville. I'm very sorry that I have very little else to say regarding this section because, my God, I genuinely sat down and I was like, I think I just didn't exist for a couple of weeks there. It's wild.
Nashville was a nice movie. Courtesy of Robert Altman. Many consider it to be Altman's magnum opus. It's a bunch of character vignettes that sort of intersect in interesting ways. For the most part, that people just drift in and out of each other's stories without any actual connections. There's some going on, but it's just like 24 people living their lives. But a good chunk of the movie is just musical performances. Good musical performance. Yeah, good musical performances. But it's just sort of to drive home the actual feeling of the time period and the location, that being in the midst of Tennessee.
Which I know I've danced around it in the past, but I don't necessarily know why I've danced around that so much. But I'm not from Nashville originally, but I lived there for the majority of my life, and so it's just a fun little thing of like, oh hey, hometown pride, and also hometown shame, mostly shame. It's a weird city, and honestly, it hasn't really changed. It's not as cool anymore. The honky tonks are gone, and mostly it's corporate. But
No more
I-40 still,
assassinations taking place.
yeah, not as many at least. You still hear about one occasionally.
I'm glad
But
we're keeping the tradition alive.
yeah, of course. I will say the most accurate part of that was that they left Metro Airport, like Metro Nashville Airport, and got onto I-40 and immediately got into a massive crash. Like, yeah, no, that's completely the most accurate part of this film.
Well, you watched a movie. So
Yeah,
you
I did.
succeeded. You
Hooray.
succeeded in your homework.
Yay, I did something. It was something that was otherwise set up outside of myself, but But what about you then? Any, I guess, movies or really just activities in general?
Oh, I've watched a couple things. I've also been playing stuff. I finally completed Pikmin 2. I had been
Nice.
having a difficult time with it with the getting pink hearts on the challenge mode maps, and that was driving me crazy for a little while, but I finally got it. So that was nice.
It's a brutal game sometimes.
Mm-hmm. It's definitely harder than the first one, but I didn't have that many qualms with the actual main campaign of it. It's just once I got into the challenge thing, and it's like, I mean, even then, beating the challenges is not that hard. It really is the beat the challenge and don't lose a single Pikmin to get a pink flower marker on the challenge that was driving me crazy, and that's what took me forever.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. The more recent games have been very forgiving as far as Pikmin losses go. The first game
that's
as
what I've
well
seen.
has certain the situations are never too harrowing, but dear God, can to lock you into some avenues that just makes it inevitable to lose someone.
Yeah, I'm glad it's over. I like the game. I liked it when I was a kid too, but committing to completing it really put me through my paces. I've also been some people have been playing around with it because they got early access to it, but just the other day, as of this recording, Civ 7 officially launched. So I've been having a fun time with that as a big fan of the Civ franchise ever since 4, I guess. I've played a couple prior to 4 at this point, but 4 was really the first, my first outing with Civilization. And
I definitely played 5 to death back in college with y'all.
Oh yeah, we definitely did that quite a bit. I do remember that, but it's a fun time. As always, they iterate on the formula, and this time they made some changes that are kind of wacky and a little hard to get a grasp on. At least for me, it was hard to get into it at certain stages, such as in this version of the game, instead of picking a world leader with a civilization that you'll sort of move forward with, you pick a world leader and then you also pick a civilization and sort of couple the two together. So it's like, I'm Ben Franklin and I'm leading the Egyptian Empire. It's like, okay. So
okay.
And certain people will couple better. Like, I mean, I just said Ben Franklin. He couples well with the Greek Empire specifically because America took, especially early on, took a lot of influence from Greek and Rome, especially.
Right.
So certain leaders and civilizations will couple together nicely. But for example, like Ben Franklin would go with America. America is not a civilization that you can select until the modern age because the game is bisected into 3 different ages. And previous games have always done that with eras, eras. You're in the industrial era, you're in the modern era, things like that. But this time around, it's firmly antiquity, the middle one, and modern. I forget what the middle one's called.
So I honestly, that could be anything. The common one would be colonial or medieval, but
it's something like that. It's all coupled together.
Medieval's probably the most accurate, but
because you're doing thousands of years and boiling it down to 3 eras, so a lot of that stuff's lumped together anyways.
Also, this kind of, and I'm gonna sidetrack us so hard with this, but like that kind of also, well, I do think that's a cool idea of like, oh, modern civilizations can only be used once you get to the modern era. What about civilizations that died off long before the modern era? Like, do you just stop playing as them once you hit them?
Well, that's what I was about to say. So the game is bisected into these 3 eras. I'm playing as Ben Franklin, and I'm playing as the Greeks. Once I get to the second era, it's time to pick your next civilization. You can get different boons or rewards. There's more coupling depending on who you select. Like, oh, I'm picking the Russians for my second go around because that's coupling well or whatever. This is more. This civilization for the second era is better for diplomatic and expansionist ideologies. And so you'll go into that. And all of the villages and city-states on the map get erased and replaced with new ones, sometimes in new locations, to sort of denote how the world is evolving. And it's not something that I necessarily hate, but it can be really difficult to get into and like wrap your head around, especially when you've been playing Civ for so long across all these different iterations. They made some interesting choices with how progression works.
Yeah, because I was going to say, it's like, I feel like we've kind of lost the plot now without the level of variation. Like, I get what they're going for, but it feels like being able to keep the same leader while spanning across different civilizations, I feel like that's just kind of opening a really weird can of worms.
Yeah, well, I think I keep bringing up Ben Franklin because he was the first one that I played, and I've only dabbled a little bit in some of the other world leaders.
USA, etc., etc.
Yeah, but it was like, oh, now I'm Ben Franklin leading the Shoshone. And it's like, this feels strange, but it was the best coupling that I could select, you know? And so whenever the loading screen pops up, it's Ben Franklin in his fucking colonial attire standing in front of this vast, wide mountainscape with a river running below it. And it's like, I don't think Franklin was ever out here.
If the creators of this game were not cowards, they would do that thing of like, you'd see those like Twitter accounts that would just like take images of people and then just change their race. Just like, someone just be like, for some godforsaken reason, just changing people to like, oh, you're Chinese now. And I feel like they missed an insane opportunity to have a situation where every single world leader has a variation of looking like the different civilizations they're leading. Like literally a Shoshone that looks like Benjamin Franklin. I think it would be
I thought you were suggesting put Ben Franklin in Redface.
No, sorry, no.
Basically the same thing.
In this case, it's more like just a really strange coincidence that the Shoshone just happen to have a guy that looks like our conception of Benjamin Franklin, which I think would be extremely poorly received, but hilarious. And that's all I care about. I feel like they missed a golden opportunity here. I would love, because this kind of harkens back to one of the lesser known entries in the Civilization series, Civilization Revolution, which I am a very big fan of personally.
The console and handheld version, which I also played a lot.
Yes, I love that one to death. But throughout it, you have a series of advisors that throughout the ages, they don't change race or anything, but they do change clothing and everything. So the same character just wearing different stuff, you know, like togas in the antiquity era and then up to suits in the modern. I feel like this is just kind of an extension of that, where it's, okay, each era, just Benjamin Franklin looks different depending on the region he's leading. You know, he looks, you know, there is an Egyptian guy who looks like Benjamin Franklin. There's a Shoshone guy that looks like Benjamin Franklin. And then you do that for all of the other leaders as well. I want to see Gandhi as a Greek.
Oh, but that's enough game talk. Let's move on to film talk. I saw two things in the theater between last time and now. I guess since Sonic and Wolfman talk in the last episode. First thing, I saw Hard Eyes. The newest from Josh Rubin. It's a fun time at the movies. For anyone unfamiliar with the premise, it's kind of like the Eli Roth-helmed Thanksgiving that came out 2023. I want to say late 2023.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Where it's sort of an attempted melding of genres set around a specific holiday. This time being Valentine's Day. It's a slasher movie taking place at Valentine's Day. But
not to be confused with My Bloody Valentine.
No, not at all, because this movie is actually attempting to blend the genre of slasher with romantic comedy, with rom-com.
Ah, I see.
Which I think is an idea that has great legs, you know, if you actually sort of blend those two together, but there's not a lot of blending in this movie between those genres. It's these two camps kind of coexist, the slasher and the rom-com camp, and occasionally you'll be in one, and then it's like, oh, it's slasher time to do the slasher stuff. And it can be kind of jarring at times. The film will just stop and start based on when it wants to have characters start having more romantic inclinations. And I'm like, okay, this is strange. But
the likes of which we haven't seen since Pride and Prejudice and Zombies.
At least, I don't even know what to say. At least I didn't really care for that. But there is a lot of comedy in the movie, hence, you know, romantic comedy. I think the physical stuff, the physical comedy is well timed and thought out. Actually had me laughing at multiple points in the theater. And I had a great crowd. I had a good crowd to see this with. They were pretty active, which definitely helps a movie like this. The dialogue, not great. It just feels really poorly written, and not in like a, oh, we're parodying rom-coms sort of way. Not in that way. It just feels like there was a lazy screenwriter writing the dialogue that wasn't really thinking before putting pen to paper. You know what I mean?
I mean,
It's
yeah, like, I mean, to be fair, you are picking a movie that is both a rom-com and a slasher. Neither of those have necessarily been the best for dialogue.
I know, but that's what I'm saying. It's when I say that, I don't mean it in. I mean it in the sense that it feels just as poor as those types of genres, and not like it is attempting to be a play on them. So
I get what you mean there.
Yeah, it's still falling into those pitfalls, and the fact that it is supposed to be a new wave horror film and a heightening of the genre, regardless of what it's parodying, it should be there should be a higher sensibility to the writing than that, because it's supposed to be more self-aware. But somehow they missed that step. None of those jokes really land for me. It's really flat, and like I said, the ideas don't mesh together well. A lot of these types of movies were kind of in a, ever since Wes Craven's Scream franchise really took off, we're in a phase where the heightening of slasher horror always falls into the same sort of categories, and it's like everyone is just aping Scream at this point. And the third act of this thing really just turns into it's Scream now. And I'm like, okay, you know what? You had me in the first couple parts. Now we're at the end. We're in this church, and we're doing like Scooby-Doo mask pulls to reveal who people are. I don't care. This, I was checking out by this point.
I want there to be a slasher masked killer movie where they just don't ever bother to unmask them. We just never know. I'm sure those exist. I'm sure there's plenty, but I would like that to be slightly more common.
That's kind of where I thought this was going, like in a very Justice League sort of, I have no idea who this is. Because there's a scene at a drive-in, classic romantic setup, a drive-in movie theater, and they knock this guy down, unmask him, and they're like, I have no idea who that is. Yeah, no idea. And it's just some guy, and then they move on. Oh, but there's a third act. We got to keep the movie going. And I was like, couldn't you have ended it there? And then you can end on like the running to the airport, whatever the fuck you want to do, to tie up your romantic comedy subplot. But I still had fun with it. I think that there are a lot of good points to be had with Hard Eyes. It's not a terrible movie. People are doing a great job. Well, I don't know about Olivia Holt. Mason Gooding is good as the male lead, and Michaela Watkins is in it as like the Devil Wears Prada style boss figure who solely exists in the romantic comedy side of things. She never interacts with any of the slasher motifs, and I think she's doing a great job. She's very funny. But yeah, there's still a lot to be desired with this one. The other thing I saw was another horror, sort of. Companion.
I haven't heard of that one.
From Drew Hancock. Another movie that could have had an interesting enough idea going for it, but a lot of it was marred through the trailer release, which I kind of can't help. I'm at the theater so often, I can't help but see trailers. I would say that 75% of the trailer for Companion was made up of the final act of the movie, which is really disappointing. But it's kind of how do I put this? It's like a Black Mirror style sci-fi horror concept is front and center, and then you move forward from there, which I'm fine with, because this could be your standard, we're doing this last minute reveal at the end. Thankfully they don't go that route. Everything is up front and center before the first act is even over, and then the rest of the movie is dealing with the ramifications of that. It actually I know there's been a lot that. Yeah, I do too. And, saying Black Mirror, I know, is not the best. When, you hear that and your brain is immediately like, uh-oh. But I do think it's apt, because if Black Mirror does anything well, I think it's the fact that the entire premise of it is sci-fi horror, and more often than not, what the conceit of the episode is going in. Does that work all the time? No, it doesn't, but I still think it fits.
Not at all. Man, I refer to the menu constantly, and that's basically its whole thing.
I like that movie. I do like that movie. where was I going with this? Oh, I mainly bring this up because I know Farge's been in the news relatively a lot lately because her first ever theatrical release, The Substance, is up for Best Picture, as well as
Oh
one or
yeah.
two other nominations, I think. And her first movie, which I believe was direct to streaming, I watched it not too long ago, Revenge, is very similar in structure to Companion, in that a vast majority of the movie is this woman on the run across a wide landscape while this group of individuals, mostly men, chase after her and, you know, try to get a hold of her before she can contact the police or whatever. That's a good chunk of this movie, and it was impossible for me to not think of Revenge while I was watching this. Companion really, unfortunately, it starts to fall apart when you start looking at the how it's delivering on its themes. I don't think it pushes the robot the robot
Bop?
narrative. It doesn't
You
push the
want to say
robot narrative
you want to
near
say
as much as it
Robotnik,
could.
didn't you?
No, but I totally could have. It doesn't push those ideas near enough. You know, as far as just a thriller goes, I think it delivers better than 90% of Black Mirror does, which is a
A
plus
bar.
given it's clearly made in the wake of that sort of Twilight Zone forward way of thinking.
Sure.
Is
Yeah,
that
it's
a very pseudo intellectual way to put things? I think so.
then again, Black Mirror is
So
pseudo intellectual at times. So
yeah, so I'm keeping with the themes better than Companion does. But that's it. That's that's everything. Aside from that, I've been, you know, well on my Oscar nominations train, just trying to follow up on everything. It's not this weekend, but the weekend after, I am going to be at the theater almost all day, both Saturday and Sunday, just for the last minute scrub of releases. Those are going to be long days for me. And I think Saturday I'm going to come home from the theater at like 5 p.m. and it's going to be like, okay, time for friend movie night. Saturday is just going to be a full day film. But
listen, if you need a break that day, we don't have to do it that day.
no. I mean, I don't work for the press. I'm doing it because I want to. I'm just saying,
You know what? Fair.
this is what's on my schedule upcoming.
That's a sentence I wish I could say more often. Well, I don't work for the press. It's just,
I'm not
it's so
there because I
distinctive.
have to be.
Yeah. The law does not require it,
No. But
as
you
if
know what?
being a part of press is required by the law or whatever, but whatever.
I just you know, cooling my heels, relaxing with a bunch of Oscar nommed stuff, and sort of, you know, taking a break from the more horror and thriller things because I've gotten a lot of that recently.
Fair.
Speaking of,
I guarantee you, because hey, more background for your buddy Stuart. I'm from North Carolina originally. I guarantee you they had the exact same reaction to seeing that there was a place called Cape Fear, North Carolina, as I did, which was Cape Fear. Oh dear God, what sort of things are going on there? And in the original creator's case, they turned it into a movie.
I'd rather go to Terror Lake.
Anyway, Cape Fear. So, kicking into it with the 1962 original film by the name of Cape Fear. It is directed by J. Lee Thompson, screenplay by James R. Webb. It is based on the novel The Executioners from 1957 by John D. MacDonald, and is produced by Cy Bartlett. Its main cast is made up of Gregory Peck as Sam Bowden, Robert Mitchum as Max Cady, Polly Bergden as Peggy Bowden, kind of a fun little play on words there, Martin Balsam as Mark Dutton, Laurie Martin as Nancy Bowden, Jack Crushin as Dave Grafton, Telly Savalas as Charlie Severs, Barry Chase as Diane Taylor, Paul Comey as Garner, Paige Slattery as Deputy Kursick, and Will Wright as Dr. Pearsall. Looking into the plot, in southeast Georgia, one Max Cady is released from prison after serving an 8-year sentence for rape and assault. He promptly tracks down Sam Bowden, an attorney whom he has personally held responsible for his conviction because Bowden interrupted his attack and testified against him. Cady begins to stalk and subtly threaten Bowden's family, including his wife Peggy and 14-year-old daughter Nancy. He kills the family dog, though Bowden cannot prove that Cady did it. A friend of Bowden, Police Chief Mark Dutton, attempts to intervene on Bowden's behalf, but he cannot prove Cady guilty of any crime. Bowden then proceeds to hire a private detective, one Charlie Severs. Cady brutally rapes a young woman, one Diane Taylor, when he brings her home, but neither the private detective nor Bowden can persuade her to testify against him. While Nancy is waiting in a car one day, Cady begins to walk near her, causing her to run and end up almost getting hit by a car. Bowden takes matters into his own hands by hiring 3 thugs to attack Cady to try and coerce him to leave town. However, the plan backfires when Cady manages to fight back and get the better of all 3. Cady's attorney vows to have Bowden disbarred for the incident. Fearing for Peggy and Nancy's safety, Bowden takes them to a houseboat in the Cape Fear region of North Carolina, on the Cape Fear River specifically. In an attempt to trick Cady, Bowden makes it seem like he has gone off to Atlanta in order to challenge his disbarment hearing. He fully expects Cady to follow his wife and daughter, and so he plans to kill Cady when he goes in order to end the fight. On a dark night, Bowden and local deputy Kursick hide in the swamp nearby, but Cady comes in and realizes that Kursick is there and drowns him, leaving no evidence of a struggle. Eluding Bowden and setting the houseboat adrift down the current of the river, Cady at first attacks Peggy on the boat, causing Bowden to go to her rescue. Meanwhile, Cady swims back to shore to attack Nancy. Bowden realizes what has happened and also swims to shore. The 2 men engage in a final fight there on the riverbank, with Bowden finally managing to grab his gun, which he had dropped, and then shoots Cady, wounding and incapacitating him. Cady tells Bowden to finish the job, but Bowden decides to do the thing that Cady earlier told him would be unbearable, to be put back in prison for the rest of his life, and to count the years, months, and the hours. In the morning light, the Bowden family are together on a boat, traveling with the police back to port. Now moving forward into the 1991 film, the plot is relatively the same, but it does get fairly different within the third act, so I'll pick it up from there whenever, they first head out onto the river and onto Cape Fear. Yes, the film was made in 1991 and directed by Martin Scorsese himself. Screenplay by Wesley Strick, once again based on The Executioners from 1957 by John D. MacDonald, and produced by Barbara DeFina. Its cast is made up of Robert De Niro as Max Cady, Nick Nolte as Sam Bowden, Jessica Lange as Lee Bowden, who is now the name of the wife character, Juliette Lewis as Danielle Danny Bowden, now the daughter, Joe Don Baker as Claude Kursick, Robert Mitchum as Lieutenant Elgert, Gregory Peck as Lee Heller, Martin Balsam as a judge, Elena Douglas as Lori Davis, Fred Dalton Thompson as Tom Broadbent, Zoe Montero as Graciela, and Dominica Cameron Scorsese as Danny's girlfriend. It should also be mentioned that both Gregory Peck and Robert Mitchum are not reprising their roles, but are making cameos as separate roles in this film. Yes, the general strokes of the plot are mostly the same, with a few notable changes, mainly to the character of Sam Bowden, the main character. Whereas in the original, he was merely a witness to Cady's crime, and that's why he hates him. In this version, he was actually his assigned defense counsel for the trial of his rape, for the rape that he had committed. However, Bowden was able to come across and then subsequently bury a report that would have suggested the victim of the rape was promiscuous, quote unquote, which would have inevitably led to a lighter sentence on Cady. As a result, Cady, who then figured out about this after learning to read in prison, because he was illiterate prior, he assigns that as the reason, why he was in jail for 14 years this time rather than only 8 in the previous film. Otherwise, generally the same. A few characters are kind of melded together just for clarity, and then a couple other extra scenes are put in. But otherwise, I will take us right into when the Bowdens are fleeing off to Cape Fear. After an attack on their home, the Bowdens decide to flee to their houseboat docked upstate in the Cape Fear River. For the record, they now also live directly in North Carolina rather than Georgia. However, driving up there, they don't notice that Cady has strapped himself to the car's undercarriage in order to track them to the houseboat. While Bowden is on deck and Lee and Danny are back in the cabin, Cady boards the boat and attacks Bowden, choking him unconscious before tying him up. He then severs the rope keeping the boat docked, setting it adrift into a violent thunderstorm on the river. He drags Bowden, who has since regained consciousness, into the cabin and prepares to rape both Lee and Danny while forcing Bowden to watch. Danny instead sets Cady on fire by squirting lighter fluid on him just as he's lighting a cigar, causing him to jump off the boat to extinguish the flames. Lee and Danny untie Bowden, who attempts to steer the boat back to shore. Cady, however, manages to grab the rope that had been cut earlier and pulls himself back on board. As the boat is rocked by the storm, a badly burned Cady puts Bowden on a mock trial at gunpoint in front of his wife and daughter. Beating Bowden and eventually getting him to confess to hiding the report 14 years earlier, Cady scolds him for failing to do his duty as an attorney before sentencing him to the ninth circle of hell. The guy had a very fire and brimstone upbringing. The storm knocks Cady off his feet, however, allowing Bowden to gain the upper hand. As Lee and Danny jump off the boat and swim to shore, Bowden cuffs Cady to the boat with his own handcuffs. When the boat hits a rock and is destroyed, the fight continues on shore, with Cady still being partly handcuffed to a railing that was on inside the ship. The current carries the severely damaged boat away from the shore, with Cady still cuffed to it. As the boat sinks, Cady begins speaking madly in tongues and sings the hymn "On Jordan's Stormy Banks I Stand." Cady exchanges a final glare with Bowden before being pulled underwater and ultimately drowning. Bowden wipes Cady's blood off his hands and rejoins Lee and Danny on the shore. In a final narration, an adult Danny states that the family had been irreparably changed by the experience and never spoke about it ever again. Otherwise, that's your lot.
I had to think, but yeah, I'd do that too.
You know, like, God knows repressing memories is a pretty immediate thing. It's nice to have it to be a family activity. It's like, we're going to repress this together.
We have to share something as a family.
Everyone's had that one trip to Disneyland that the family doesn't talk about.
Anyhow, full circle time. It's full circle time, they say. All right, handful here. Kind of split the difference between 62 and 91. Starting right off the bat, we have Barry Chase, who was Diane Taylor in Cape Fear 1962. She was also Sylvester's girlfriend in 1963, It's a Mad, 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 Mad World. She was the woman that was wildly dancing for like 5 minutes.
Oh, right. Oh, my God.
Jack Crucian was attorney Dave Grafton. He was also Salvatore in 1953's The War of the Worlds. How about this one, then? Telly Savalas was Detective Charles Severs. He also played El Sleazo Tough in 1979's The Muppet Movie. So he was one of the tough guys at the El Sleazo bar. And finally, for 1962, bridging the gap into 91, we have Gregory Peck, who was in both of these films. He was the original Sam Bowden in Cape Fear 1962. He comes back as lawyer Lee Heller in 91's Cape Fear as sort of a legacy casting role. But we saw him once before as the lead in Richard Donner's The Omen, Robert Thorne.
Oh, of course. That was a good movie.
A very good movie. Rest in peace, Richard Donner. That was like 3 years ago at this point, but I'm still I think about it every day.
Listen, what's 3 years to a life, or some other poignant shit?
Oh, well, Jessica Lange, now that we're in 91 territory, Jessica Lange was Leigh Bowden in Cape Fear. She was also Cora Papadakis in 1981's The Postman Always Rings Twice. It's the one with Nicholson.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I was wondering where I had seen her attitude.
Her attitude?
She's a bit mean in both those films.
I don't know who this lady is, but she's got a bit of attitude. The only other one that we have for 91 is the big one, but that's De Niro, who was Vito Corleone in The Godfather Part 2.
Half that movie was great. The one with De Niro, actually.
Listen, I've come around on the rest of it. I like the other stuff just fine as well. Treated as a rise to power. I think I was a bit more negative on it just because I watched all three of them in sort of a sprint.
I think the bad taste of the third one was probably still in my mouth at the time.
I've rewatched the second one since, and I was like, you know what? I mean, the flashback scenes in the past are still the best part of that movie, but I like the other stuff with Pacino sort of head in the family. I like that other stuff just fine too. So who knows? Whatever. But that's it for Full Circle.
Oh, fantastic. Thankfully, this was a surprisingly straightforward plot line compared to some of our other pieces, and especially for Scorsese, the more that I think about it. But hey.
Yeah, it helps being an adaptation, in parts an adaptation of a book, and also a remake of an adaptation of a book. So
right.
He's got a lot of stuff restraining him.
With the same somewhat annoying opening score as well. With the
I mentioned it brief. I'll just kick it off, I guess. But I find that score really endearing for a number of reasons, and the primary one is, as I already mentioned to Stu previously, but I am so overly familiar with the season 5 Simpsons parody of Cape Fear that this was my first time watching both of these movies, and when I was watching the 91 version, it's like, oh, with De Niro chewing on a cigar laughing in the theater and him holding onto the bottom of the car, like every direct shot, I was just thinking about The Simpsons the whole time, which can be difficult, but I've had that problem before in the past, like It's a Mad 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 World, for example. The main takeaway from that is Alf Clausen, who did the music on The Simpsons for a long time. He hasn't been with them for like 5 or 6 years now. There was a legal thing, whatever. But he composed a score that is so similar yet different to the main sting of Cape Fear, and it was so popular that it's just Sideshow Bob's theme now. And so even like as of a year or two ago, he shows up and they're still playing that Cape Fear-esque music behind him. So it's very fun, and there's a lot of charm to it for me, just because I directly compare it with that character at this point. So it didn't bug me.
Wouldn't have expected that.
That was the takeaway from that, is it didn't bother me at all.
Yeah, fair. I was just kind of surprised to hear it twice. I didn't think that was one of the things Scorsese would have held on to, but there you are.
That is interesting, though, because unless it's like a huge staple, which, I mean, Cape Fear was not a movie. The 62 movie is not like a cultural zeitgeist movie. So
No.
it's funny that they kept the theme to the movie for this new Scorsese version. It's like, we're just gonna do that with, a bigger orchestra behind it.
Yeah. Not least which for the fact that, like, now listening back to it, I'm like, yeah, no, this does sound like a very old piece from this definitely feels like a piece of music that was made for a film in the 60s. Like this feels like that kind of style of what thrillers were like back then, of just very stinging, nothing necessarily complex about it kind of thing.
You could see that music playing behind a trailer for the movie, and like text appearing on the screen in a wipe that says "Feel the terror." Like it's very fitting of like a 50s 60s sort of thriller piece.
Where else but Cape Fear? So, I bet you when that movie first got announced, people in North Carolina were like, "What the fuck? What's scary about that?"
No, the mayor saw the trailer for the movie and he's like, "Oh, this isn't good."
Yeah, exactly.
Dabbing his forehead.
It's like, oh, at least with Jaws, it wasn't a real island, if that movie existed yet. Yes.
So the big point of contention between these movies that I see discourse around online, not that this film is so culturally relevant that there is a lot of discourse, but
yes.
whenever I see the films being compared, it's primarily between Mitchum and De Niro and how they portray the Max Cady character. It's like, well, the original Robert Mitchum portrayal is super reserved and terrifying in his own, because he's like stalking in the night, almost like a shadow, whereas De Niro turns it into an over-the-top cartoon performance. And I do agree with that, but I have to agree with that. He is like a cartoon character. He is like a mental Daffy Duck. That cannot be argued. However, because of that, he is so much more unpredictable, which lends itself to its own brand of fear. There are some things that I think go too far. Not in a sense that you can't show this in a movie, but for this movie, I'm like, I don't know about that. Like when he bites off Ileana Douglas's cheek, I'm like, do we have to see him do that? I don't know about this. But
it does also bear mentioning that I didn't go over it in the plot synopsis, but there is also a distinct part about the fact that Max Cady is distinctly a pedophile as well. At least like he was targeting, the girl he raped for going to prison was 16 years old. And then he also started targeting Bowden's daughter, Danny, who is also 16. And it doesn't help also the fact that she's like into it in a couple of occasions. Like when he kind of like pretends to be her teacher and kind of is able to be alone with her, and he successfully seduces her a little. And I'm just like I get it, but at the same time,
he puts his whole ass thumb in her mouth. And right, you know what? Like, if I was on set, I would be like, no. Not because of like artistic integrity or whatever, but Robert De Niro is not putting his thumb in my mouth.
Yeah. And especially like as this character, which ranges like, and I will say, just to kind of go to the point of, he kind of like one versus the other. I almost kind of got to disagree with the feeling of him like stalking in the night in the original one. He was always wearing that white suit, and I really never once got the feeling that I was actually that intimidated by the guy, if I'm honest. He kind of just seemed like a bit insistent, and we don't really see him being necessarily violent until the two occasions but like dangerous until the 2 occasions where we actually do see him on screen committing violence. And otherwise, he's just kind of just some schmarmy dude who's a bit, gruff with people. And I don't know. I do kind of prefer the unpredictability of De Niro's version, for as cartoonish as it seems.
I think that's where the, quote unquote stalking in the, because you brought up the white shirt thing. I think the quote unquote stalking in the night has to do more so with how reserved he is. And it's more surprising that he's around every corner because of how insistent he is and he doesn't give up. I do also prefer the De Niro version just because I find him more terrifying. But I think that's where people are coming from when they're making the comparison.
Yeah. I will also say, I do kind of just like how they interweave Cady into the story in the remake as well, quite a bit. Just because, there's the moment where he rapes the woman, the Diane character. In the original, I'm not really sure if he does that for a particular reason other than just he's a crazy guy. Meanwhile, in the remake, he actually does it specifically to get at Bowden, who is having at least an emotional level affair with Diane at the time, which we'll also need to get into the difference in Bowden's character, which I would love to do, because I actually really like what they did with him. And so I kind of like just details like that, where, we do see that, yeah, Cady is crazy, but he is also insanely dedicated to the point of insanity, which is, again, kind of the point. And at times starts to beg our belief, but he doesn't really do too much more than the Cady character does in the original. He also does plenty of crazy crap, with the one major exception of hanging to the underside of the car. I mean, come the fuck on, man. Like, you can see him from the outside perspective if you just look down half an inch. It's like, and the fact that you hit a single bump on the road and you get cooked under there. Like, what are you talking about, movie? Like, why is that what we decided to do here?
I mean, again, go back to The Simpsons, which I promise I will not just constantly be bringing that up, but I mean, he's on the underside of the car and he hits every road bump along the way. And they're like, kids, let's drive through the cactus patch. So
oh, I see.
we knew that was ridiculous, at least.
Right. Fair. I'm glad that's at least been addressed by someone.
Somebody somewhere addressed this issue.
I believe also there was like a moment in Rick and Morty that briefly referenced it, which, shame upon my name for bringing that up in here. But,
Yeah, and of course that's a bit more irritating because it's the Dan Harmon style of forward-thinking writing, where it's just, instead of referencing the thing, let's just say we're referencing it, because I'm pretty sure the woman just keeps saying, Cape Fear, it's a Cape Fear, because she's doing a Cape Fear. So, that's good. That's good writing.
But yeah, shame upon my name for bringing that up here. But, it's at least been referenced before.
But hey, there are some great, I mean, not to shed anything against, Martin Balsam, Telly Savalas, who I mainly know as a TV guy. 62 had a good cast, but 91, just seeing Joe Don Baker in a movie, I'm like, hello, old friend. It's so nice to see you. I was actually very upset when he got killed. I was like, no!
I mean, like, he went out, well, I was going to say like a badass, but he was sitting, sweating on a chair while getting choked out by a guy dressed in drag.
Yeah.
That was another scene that happened, by the way.
I thought you were going to say he died doing what he loved. I was like,
he might have.
Talking to housekeepers?
I mean, there might be something to be said about being choked by a person wearing drag, but that's besides the point.
Yeah. I don't know, with piano wire?
Listen, I don't shame. I just advise against.
Yeah, that shit's sharp. I wouldn't do that. Also, sorry, this just drew my eye. This has almost not... Well, I guess it has to do with the cast because it's cast listing. But Cape Fear 1991 cast list. Edgar Allan Poe IV playing a prisoner? Question mark?
Hell? What?
Excuse me?
Pardon that. Is your... Like, you use a program to find your list, right?
Yeah, it pulls it all from TMDB. So...
Is it taking the piss?
Edgar Allan Poe IV, known for Cape Fear, My Girl, Bikini Beach Race. Oh, that's a good movie. Yeah, he has an IMDb page, too.
I'm fairly certain Edgar Allan Poe did not have children. Am I wrong in that? I thought he, died a drunken fool. A drunken loner.
Edgar Allan Poe IV is a descendant of Edgar Allan Poe. He claims to be the great-great-grandnephew of the famous writer and was named in his honor. So it's not like a direct child.
Okay. Yeah, he had siblings.
But he is a grandnephew.
Okay. Gotcha. I was going to say, it's like, insane. I'm fairly certain one of the biggest parts about the guy is that he died alone.
Oh, that's...
Not unlike Lovecraft.
That's crazy.
Wait, no, Lovecraft had a wife. Never mind. Sorry. I'm
He
getting
had a
my...
wife and a cat and a village. You know what? Good for him.
good on him. Anyway,
Um,
sorry. But yeah, that's a hell of a
yeah,
name.
I didn't mean to sidetrack us. I just saw that and I went, what?
But it's kind of on the subject of the differences in, characters, because there are quite a few in this one, at least in the central cast. The other ones of like the private investigator and the chief of police and that sort of thing are basically the same, because, how much different can they be? Um, I I like the characters of... I like how Bowden, the patriarch Bowden, is portrayed in both of these. Oh, it's Sam Bowden for both. For some reason, I thought it was different. But yeah, I like Sam Bowden's character in both of these for like different reasons. And I'm pretty sure the only reason I really like the 62 one is because it's Gregory Peck, and I just think he's a good actor. But I do think we've kind of run into this character archetype before. That is to say, stoic family man who can do no wrong kind of thing. Borderline just like one of those, like old sci-fi pulps where he was like, the myth of the competent man, basically. It's like they just seem to be capable of everything and have a heart of gold kind of deal. Which, again, if anyone's going to do that, Gregory Peck can do that well. But
that's what I was going to say. Gregory Peck really fits that persona. Nick Nolte, anything I see him in, I'm like, he has killed like 3 people already.
Oh my God, yeah.
He knows the look of death.
Yeah, like, my God, this man has watched people's life drain from their eyes on more than one occasion. Like, it's... Oh, God. Like, and I do... It was very boring watching the 62 one, where it was just kind of like, all right, we're just kind of... He just kind of reacts to a lot of things at a certain point. Obviously, in the end, he comes up with a whole scheme of, luring him in, and, yeah, it does... It is pretty dull in the 62 version, just because, a lot of times Peck's character is just kind of reacting to everything up until like the end, where he kind of comes up with this scheme, which, incidentally, him coming up with that scheme, it feels very out of place in the original, just simply for the fact of, based on his character, it's like, man, all up to this point you have been this stoic guy. You've kind of had some shortcomings of like, agreeing to have him beat up by these thugs and everything, but ultimately it seems like he had no choice at that point. He felt like he was out of options. But and in the end, where he explicitly uses his family as bait, that feels very out of character, even without having seen the remake first. Having him do that setup with like the kind of home invasion one before, where the things were a bit more in his control, that made a bit more sense. And also for the fact that Nick Nolte's version of it was a fuck. He was a prick. He was a maniac at times. He definitely was a bad lawyer for what it was worth. I get why he did what he did, but my God, man, maybe make a decision that doesn't do that. Just do what you have to do.
Well, certainly a conflict of interest, but also like I don't know, the trap in the 62 one feels a little more contained, whereas the 91 version is like a Rube Goldberg machine with teddy bears and... Which, what the fuck is...
Fishing line.
Did I miss something? Is he supposed to grab the bear? Like, I
think
didn't really
it was meant
follow
to be
that part.
It's meant to be because like he had the trip line attached to multiple points and wrapped around the bear, and then depending on which way the bear would get like leaned to or pulled towards, that told him like which direction he was trying to break in from. Like it wasn't necessarily supposed to get grabbed or anything. It was just kind of meant to be like a quiet way of indicating which direction to focus without having to like watch multiple windows at once.
Kind of makes sense, but also this comes so late in the movie. This comes so late in the movie too, because it's right before they head to Cape Fear. It's like you're stupid because you are doubting the menacing intelligence of this Max Cady character, which by this point in the movie you should be well familiar with. I mean, I don't expect you to know that he was in the house the whole time until you come to that realization, of course. But you should at least know that he's smart enough to, like, I don't know, not get fooled by tripwire.
Yeah. And at the very least, it does kind of give a setup of, like, why they have to go to Cape Fear and why they get followed there and everything. Because, with Kursick being killed, they get kind of framed for murder. So, it's an act of desperation that they go. But yeah, that whole scene was just kind of cockamamie at times. So it's kind of hard to follow by the end of it as well. Like the sequence where he wakes up and he realizes he's already been in the house, and then they hear the gunshot, and then Kursick's dead, and everything's going mad at once. Then he slips in Kursick's blood which I was like, why? That felt unnecessary. Like, I
Jessica
know
Lange runs in and she slips too. It's like a Keystone Cops.
are you kidding me? Um, and so I guess it's meant to just kind of like just add to the franticness of the situation, which, Scorsese hallmark. I can't fault that. But yeah, I'm glad they added the scene, if only to kind of give a better setup into the final act, in the final like location. But dang, if it just doesn't seem like, it kind of feels like it's falling apart at the seams by the end.
Yeah, but at least it's more active, and there's more that's going on to sort of keep your attention, because I think the 62 version is well put together, and it's certainly well shot, but it's almost like with all of the legal scenes and the back and forth, there are so many scenes with Max Cady and just police just sitting around talking about things. It's like a noir movie where there's no mystery to solve.
Yeah, it's and obviously there's plenty of police procedural scenes in the remake as well, but they at least feel like, intense. Like the moment where they watch him get strip searched behind like the one like glass and everything, where just you have the feeling that Katie is somehow looking through the glass and everything back at him. It's, as he's standing there in his red leopard print jockstrap, which I really did not need to see of Robert De Niro, but you know what? It fits the character, I guess.
Well, at least it's 91 Cape Fear De Niro and not like 2012 Meet the Fockers or Baby Fockers De Niro or something.
Yeah, this is still in the era where he was like, yeah, no, he's attractive. I get that. But God, imagine Irishman De Niro.
Ugh.
Just making him redo that whole scene with Nick Nolte as well. I'm like, probably Nick Nolte's not really in a great spot either.
Nick Nolte's looking a lot more and more like Ron Perlman these days.
I was going to say, I was like, he looks like Bahama Ron Perlman in his Wikipedia link. It's like, all right, I guess he just stayed on Cape Fear. It's like that's anywhere if you're gonna go anywhere, I suppose. Yeah, screw it, why not?
Which again, there is so much more happening in the climax of the 91 version that
oh my God.
What? In the 62, I could see myself going back to Cape Fear and taking a vacation once this guy's dead. 91, I would never go back. Do you remember the Wild River Rapids tour with a gun to my head while this maniac was shouting Bible verses and having a mock trial? While also about to rape my wife and 16-year-old daughter. Yeah, no thanks.
Dear God, I would say that's a hell of an end piece, though.
That's true. Especially him just sinking at the end, saying gibberish or speaking in tongues is the synopsis put it, which I guess is probably accurate given his obsession with the Bible.
And like he kind of, there's a throwaway line he talked about, like he was brought up in like that sort of old time religion kind of community, like, bringing snakes into the parishioner tent and all that sort of thing. So like, yeah, the speaking in tongues thing, especially for rural Georgia, that makes sense.
Which is really interesting too, just the way these characters are set up, because De Niro's Katie is really, I don't know, like, you know what? Good job on the actor's part, because I was actively hating the character as I was watching the movie, where it's like, it's a fake thing that I'm looking at that I can rationalize. Very rare, because I'm constantly like thinking about behind the scenes and like, oh, how'd they do this? How'd they do that? It's the same reason I have a hard time watching animated stuff anymore, because I'm just pointing out all the voice actors. But my God, to be able to get me to hate a fake person so much. Though that was not my point, believe it or not. My point was the representation of the Katie character in the 91 is so much more of like a holier than thou, I'm smarter than you. He's constantly, like, the thing he constantly is bringing up is like social standings and being on equal footing, and which I can understand with how we come to know his, the very little that we know about his background. It's also a little messy when you get right down to it, because it's like, okay, this guy is a Georgian smooth talker that learned how to read and sort of educated himself in prison. He thinks he's holier than thou given his upbringing, and he's constantly obsessing over the Bible, and he's got tattooed verses on himself. He's also worried about societal standings and being on equal footing with his lawyer, even though that doesn't really have anything to do with why he was put away. And I never got the impression that he was a character that was picked on and jailed because he was but maybe I'm reading it wrong, but his motives seem all over the place, which makes him even more like a bizarre wacky land character. to me.
Yeah. Not least of which for the fact that he is also just a psychotic rapist.
Well, of course. We can't
Yeah,
forget that.
all of the stuff on top of it all is in the fact that he is just straight up a bastard otherwise. Which actually, I think kind of for me kind of comes back around into actually being a good villain for the simple fact of especially in a lot of modern iterations of anything really, there's a tendency to try to go towards the humanizing element of a villain. You know, like, hell, I'm still trying to go through the Day of the Jackal series, which it's been doing a lot to do that, which I think is the point. But it does kind of undercut the fact that, yeah, this guy's a killer. And I think in this case, having all of these like grand idealistic things and then also being undercut by the fact that he is just a rotten human being kind of just comes around into making him just a full all-rounder villain in every aspect. And I actually think that's really good and hard to do well, especially hard to portray, which I think De Niro does really well for, again, as cartoonish as it is. But again, that kind of plays into it in a weird way.
Mm-hmm.
You know, mixed accent quality and all.
The accent was interesting because sometimes I thought it was really on point, and then other times, mainly when he's shouting, he kind of loses the thread a bit, and it's like, what are we even doing here? But
Come out wherever you are.
I still liked it better than whatever Robert Mitchum was doing because it felt more like
Lord.
he was trying to imitate Bing Crosby.
Okay, yeah, I was wanted to say it at some point, but I didn't know where to put that in. Yeah, I was like, is he just being Bing Crosby in this?
Well, I don't know about that, officer.
Is he being Bing Crosby by way of, oh hell, who's the one guy in the Rat Pack?
Which one, Dean Martin?
Dean Martin. That's it. He's being Bing Crosby by way of Dean Martin. Right? Yeah, the alcoholic. Okay, the other alcoholic. I mean, the other alcoholic. But yeah, it's. I wish I liked the 62 version of Cady more, but at the end of the day, I just kind of got bored of him. You know, like he was vaguely threatening at times, but I think that's also just, you know, films of the time not necessarily having the teeth that I'm sure they'd like to have. Like, my guess is that the original 57 book, The Executioners, probably has a lot more in common with the 91 version as far as explicitity. And so, but you know, this is just me guessing. I have no idea for sure. But yeah, it was just kind of hard for me to keep my interest on him in 62. Whereas, you know, De Niro's chewing the scenery in half by the end of 91.
And also, because we focus so much on the two main players because they are the vast majority of the feature, I really want to give props to Juliette Lewis herself for coming across as really creepy at times.
Oh my god, yeah.
I think it helps that maybe it's just because more of the relation, even though this is 1991, more of the relation of what a modern teenager is supposed to be. Whereas Polly Bergen in 62, it's like, is this a 16-year-old girl or is it a 7-year-old girl? I can't tell.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, 7-year-old girl playing against Robert De Niro would be infinitely more terrifying, but we'll keep it with Juliette Lewis, who some of her line readings in this are downright haunting. It's like she's detached emotionally from everything around her, which
I was gonna
is
say
why she's so susceptible to De Niro's prodding early on. It really isn't until the housekeeper's killed that she's finally like, okay, this guy fucking sucks, which is an understatement. But
right, yeah.
I don't know. She's a teenager.
It's like yeah, she feels like a more realistic modern teenager. That's for sure. It feels like she feels like a realistic teenager for the fact that her parents are rich assholes. So like I've met people like that. You know, that's genuinely just kind of how they act. And I'm sure that yeah, they would check back into reality if they saw, you know, the whole thing with Kursick, seeing him get choked and then accidental suicided.
Oh, and then if I slipped in his blood and
oh Lord. At this point, I would just run away. I would just, if I were that teenager, I would be like, no, I'm good. I'm done. My father earlier hit me, and I was into the guy who was trying to kill me and my family, and probably rape me and my mom, and then kill my dad. I'm just leaving. I'm just leaving forever. Like the therapy for that does not exist in 1991.
Which, by the way, can we just talk about how wild it is in the 91 version that she is in school and goes to what is supposed to be a drama class with her teacher. The teacher's not there. It's Max Cady, and there are no other students around. I would be right out of there immediately. Like, this is supposed to be a drama class. If there aren't, like, other people around, no.
I think it does need to be said at the end of the day, with some general exceptions, most of the people in this outside of Cady are kind of just idiots. And Cady makes up for it to the point of almost ludicrousness. By all rights, Cady was a Navy SEAL in this movie. And that's what the things he was getting up to. At a certain point, I was just kind of like, okay, I think we've established this well enough that he is a force of nature kind of character. But for God's sake, he is a only recently literate rural Georgian son of a bitch. What do we like? Can we maybe rein it in a touch?
Yeah, well, it gets to the point where you're like, how did anyone take it? How did anyone take advantage of him in prison? I could see that early on, but I feel like he would not be getting released because he probably would have killed 2 prisoners already before the time his sentence was up.
Yeah, which I think they do briefly allude to during that. Like he did, I think, kill one of his cellmates, but they weren't able to prove it on him. Which again, the fact that how do you not able to prove that in a prison? Like how hard is that? Everyone's
Right.
in the same place. You get to see where people go. Like I'm sure it happens. I'm not going to say like the prison system's flawless. It's very far from it, but it's just kind of silly that they didn't think, hey, maybe it's just murder and maybe we shouldn't take any chances because this guy's clearly a nut.
But also, like, it's prison. They would just pin it on him anyways, even if they didn't have
Right,
the proof.
exactly.
They'd be like, you did that. You're
Yeah.
staying in here because I have all the power and I say so. And you know what?
Like
In this one circumstance, they would be right.
exactly, yeah. It kind of makes sense that they have the whole the law can't do anything about it thing when he's out of jail, where it's like, okay, there's only so much he can do without being directly threatened or attacked. But inside jail, I think at that point all bets are kind of off because that's kind of where that's gotten to. Like, yeah, they're just going to be like, we know you did it. We don't have to prove it because we're basically your gods in here. So we're going to beat you to death and not care.
It. I know this was the 60s too. It wasn't really until the late 60s, early 70s where we really started to get wild with the new age of Hollywood cinema. But I just wish 62 went a little bit farther with the Sam Bowden character because I think seeing Gregory Peck's breaking point would be so much more impactful than seeing Nick Nolte's.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. That would have been incredible, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I'm picturing it now and I'm like, yeah, that's incredible. I don't even have to see it on screen to know that that would have been great. I have such a weird opinion of both these movies. It's the 62 one is subtle in a lot of really good ways, and then it never really takes the moment to not be subtle. And then the 91 is the opposite. It's cool in a lot of very extravagant and in your face ways, and then it doesn't really die down too much. Even the scenes that are quiet and meant to be kind of drawing out the suspense do still feel like alarm bells going off in my head. Notably, the part where he's seducing the 16-year-old. Like, I don't care like if they're trying to build the suspense thing here. I'm already at the top. Like, we're not at the moment where the Jaws theme's at the dun 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 dun. No, it's like that all the time. It doesn't build up. It's just like the shark is here for like 12 minutes.
Yeah. I think we're pretty well at final thoughts at this point, and I just 91 is so wild and swings for the fences in so many ways that I have to give it props over the 62 one, which again I think it's shot really well and I think it has excellent staging, but it can just come across as a little tiresome at points.
I'll just gonna say it. It's just kind of
meanders.
boring.
Yeah, it drags its feet at certain point, and it doesn't go nearly as far as it could if it was made in a different time.
It's still so weird to say that I do love De Niro's performance in this, because by all rights, he is a dang cartoon character. He's practically Woody Woodpecker in a few scenes. He kind of is in a few other scenes, actually. But yeah, it's the better film by and large. I think I think I can still definitively say I am mixed on Scorsese. I think there's maybe two, maybe three films of his that I genuinely am like, yeah, those are good. Them being the Goodfellas, Gangs of New York, and maybe this.
Mm,
Otherwise, like, and this is, I should say, this is nowhere near Goodfellas or Gangs of New York. It's those two have a very high place in my heart, if only because Gangs of New York, because I like the historical time period, and Goodfellas just because it's a genuinely good movie. Um,
right.
but I just don't.
Yeah.
I still need to see Raging. I still haven't seen Raging Bull, and I need to. But otherwise, I'm just like, I don't know how I feel about this guy.
I haven't seen Raging Bull either. Obviously, I hear good things. I mean, Best Picture stuff aside, I have just
Yeah.
generally heard good things. But I don't know. I like Killers of the Flower Moon. I liked Hugo. I will still recommend to
Oh
anybody.
shit, Hugo's his. I
Yeah,
forgot about that.
I will still recommend to anybody to see After Hours. I think After Hours is a great dark comedy from the mid '80s.
Oh yeah. Also, I will add Hugo to my list because I forgot that was him, and that was a very genuinely sweet movie. And the book that it is based on is also very good.
The Scorsese had nothing to do with that.
Yeah, no. That's just I liked the book. Then the movie came out, and I was like, okay, cool, this is nice.
Well,
I have a soft spot for that.
We've given our final opinions on how everything sort of comes together. I will ask real quick, do you have any questions?
Sure. I was actually going to ask, because I came up with this partway through it, simply because of your comments regarding The Simpsons. What I think, guess kind of like more kind of question around the film and the concept of it all. What is a movie you haven't seen done by either The Simpsons or an adjacent animated piece that you would love to see them parody? Like, what is a serious or otherwise film you would love to see parodied in either a cartoon or some other aspect?
Well, The Simpsons is the obvious choice to go with as far as thinking about it, just because I've seen the first 10 or so seasons so many times through, and then I have just watched every episode past that point. So it's more easy for me to to compare against. God, but what's something that they haven't done that isn't just too out there and wouldn't make any sense? I don't know.
Right.
I really would like for there to be actual Sonic the Hedgehog play in some way with The Simpsons, which just sounds like an internet fever dream. The closest I
mean,
can think,
it is, but for sure.
the closest I could think to that would be like they had a brief Sonic caricature in season 8's Marge Be Not Proud, when Bart's stealing a video game. But outside of that, I don't think Sonic has gotten much play in the series, as opposed to something like Mario and Donkey Kong, which is more relevant to boomers that wrote for the show and in many ways still write for the show.
Right, yeah.
So I guess that would be my first go-to.
Fair. I could see that. Kind of outside of the concept a little, but I'd love to see a racing game off of The Great Gatsby. Just because there's a lot of scenes with cars, and one very particular scene with car that I think would be hilarious in a video game.
I wonder how you would do that. A racing game where just in the middle of one of the tracks, everything stops dead, and you just have to stop your car because you hit a woman.
Yeah, actually, I think that'd be insane. I would like to see Goodfellas. Stay with me on this. The Goodfellas in Fairly Odd Parents. I think that would be hilarious.
Okay. That is certainly a choice.
It's like, I don't even know if it's still going as a show per se, but for some reason I can see those characters perfectly drawn in that really annoying Butch Hartman style,
Well, they have that Fairly Odd Parents Fairly Odder right now, or is it a New Wish? One of them was the live action show that everyone hated and lasted for like a season, and now there's one where it's like a new, like a girl or something.
Oh yeah,
I think that's a New Wish.
I've seen snippets of that. Yeah.
So the franchise is still going, but
because what else is Nickelodeon going to do these days?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think that just like having just that going on, which because I'm realizing now also I'm just kind of thinking of Goodfeathers from like the Animaniacs, but yeah, that's which is the obvious one, but yeah, I feel like I could perfectly see that entire movie done in Fairly Odd Parents while somehow avoiding all the horrific deaths. Like it's all just kind of like parallels alongside to it.
Okay. Well, those are our answers, as odd as they may be.
Fairly odd.
Oh, good Lord.
I'm sorry.
I have a brief potential segment, if you will indulge me.
Ooh.
Something interesting that I thought we might do that probably will not play well in an audio medium, but I don't give a damn.
Fair enough.
I am going to share my screen with you.
Gasp.
It's almost like we talked about this briefly beforehand.
Yeah, we did briefly talk about this beforehand, so I at least know what's going on.
So this is something title pending, I guess. I have called it Box Office Boogie, but it could change. If I do this again in the future, we'll see. Again, this won't be like an every episode thing, but basically, I have put together a list currently in chronological order of a lot of Martin Scorsese films. For those at home, it is Mean Streets, Taxi Driver, Raging Bull, After Hours, The Color of Money, Goodfellas, Cape Fear, Gangs of New York, The Departed, Hugo, The Wolf of Wall Street, and Killers of the Flower Moon, his most recent movie. Obviously, this is not everything, but if it was everything, this would be just insufferable. So I am also, obviously, I'm sharing my screen just so you can see the end result of this. I am going to copy a link and send it to you. Are you able to click on this and edit it at all? I am curious.
Let us see.
I'm using a website called ListMoz, by the way.
I believe I am. Yeah, it lets me click on things and I didn't mean to check mark that one. Sorry, Taxi Driver.
So task for you. Can you arrange these movies from lowest domestic box office gross to highest?
Oh, sweet Lord. So highest at the top, lowest at the bottom.
I guess it'll work either way. The way I have it formatted is lowest at the top, highest at the bottom.
Okay. Yeah, then I can try to do that.
Because as you
Is
see
that
on
what
my
they're
screen, I
currently
have a
already at?
second.
No, they're chronological, sorry.
Yeah, as you can see on my second tab up here, I have the final results for whenever you're done with this little exercise.
Sure.
And we'll
Then
see
yeah,
how
I'll
close
do
you
lowest
got
at the
it.
top. Okay. Let's see then. I'm going to, and I'll just go ahead and yes. I think I'm actually going to put Color of Money at the highest because it's one of the older ones. Actually, no, sorry. Probably After Hours as the lowest, just because I I'm not going to be the ultimate judge of that sort of thing, but I've almost never heard of that one outside of a couple of occasions. But I'm willing to bet that's also in a general sense of a lot of his other films. To that end, I think I'm going to follow that with Color of Money for the same basic reason. After that, I'm actually going to maybe do Mean Streets because I know some of that reputation.
Mm-hmm. And also, I mean,
After
Mean Streets is like, if not his first film, one of his earliest. So
right,
makes
so I'm
sense.
gonna guess I actually might make Mean Streets the lowest just to be safe because it seems like an easy answer and not one I'm willing to pass up. So I will put that as the current lowest to my mind. So in order from lowest, Mean Streets, After Hours, Color of Money. After that, I'm actually going to kind of take a bit of a Hail Mary here and say Killers of the Flower Moon, because for the simple fact of I didn't hear a dang thing about it after it came out, and I saw that it was nearly 4 hours long, and I take a personal affront to that. So I'm going to say that.
I do too. Good movie. I do too.
After that, I'm going to maybe say I don't want to say Taxi Driver just because that was pretty influential, but I don't know if that did well domestically, at least money wise.
Right. And yeah, this is just the box
Huh.
office, so it does not include like how much money has this made over the years. It is just what did it
Yeah.
make when it came out.
Say when it came out, then yeah, I'll actually do after Killers of the Flower Moon. I'll do Taxi Driver. After that, probably Cape Fear, just because that seems like a pretty middle of the road one. After that, maybe Raging Bull. No, Raging Bull I'll put slightly higher. I think I'll put Goodfellas immediately after Cape Fear. Actually, no, I'll do Gangs of New York immediately after Cape Fear, just because I know that one's not as popular. So yeah, Okay, so currently we're at Mean Streets, then After Hours, then Color of Money, Killers of the Flower Moon, Taxi Driver, Cape Fear, Gangs of New York. After that, I'll probably say Goodfellas. Actually, no, I'll do a Raging Bull after that, just because as time goes on, typically I'm going to assume those box offices will go up, at least with his higher known films. So yeah, then Raging Bull, then I'll say Goodfellas, then I'll say probably Hugo. After that, The Departed, and then almost certainly Wolf of Wall Street is at the top. There's no way that one's not the highest grossing. Like, with how much it was talked about, with how many accolades, whether or not it won a lot of stuff, the fact that everyone didn't shut up about it for a while, yeah, I'm going to say that one's at the top. So, my final answer, from lowest to highest, Mean Streets, After Hours, Color of Money, Killers of the Flower Moon, Taxi Driver, Cape Fear, Gangs of New York, Raging Bull, Goodfellas, Hugo, The Departed, and Wolf of Wall Street.
And I have refreshed.
I am tentative about Hugo and The Departed, just because who knows?
Yeah, I refreshed the page to update with your answers. So we will now take a look at the results, see how close you got.
I am scared.
So you did not do terribly. You
We got the
started
first
off
two, at
strong.
least.
Yeah, you started off strong with Mean Streets After Hours. Mean Streets is his only film of this list. His only film that grossed lower than $1 million with $32,000 only. So
It's fair.
very early in his career, people didn't know who he was. After Hours, yeah, I wish it had made more, but it was sort of a break from formula for him. And then Raging Bull comes next in
Really?
1980.
Raging Bull was third lowest. God, I didn't get close.
And then after that,
Color of Money's all the way at the sixth.
well, I think Paul Newman probably drove a lot of that crowd. And Tom Cruise was up
fair.
and coming at the time. He was fairly hot. So I think the two of them together probably did service there. Killers of the Flower Moon right in the middle. Making 68.
I wasn't too far off with that one, at least. But yeah, no, that's also surprising.
Yeah, and then, of course, the top five, Hugo, Gangs of New York, Cape Fear, all in the 70,000 range. Cape Fear almost, or 70 million range. Cape Fear almost breaking 80 mil. And then The Wolf of Wall Street, 116. The Departed, our favorite The Departed, his highest grossing movie at $132 million.
God damn.
We got
That's honestly surprising with the amount of like fanfare that Wolf of Wall Street got, that it wasn't his highest grossing. That's honestly shocking to me.
I think it might just be like he had a reputation by this point, and The Departed got a lot of box office press at a time where we were all terminally online and we were paying more attention to
I guess so, yeah.
releases and nominations, and I think that probably helped drive it.
Well, I'm not too disappointed with my listing. You know, it's definitely very off on a few occasions, but I got the bottom and the top done pretty well. I didn't get the first and second correct, but I got at least the 2 movies.
Yeah, you just swap them around, and I mean, Hugo was up there.
Yeah.
And Gangs of New York was up there too. You really just, I think it was an overestimation of some of them, and then some of the more well-remembered movies, an overestimation of those, like Raging Bull and Taxi Driver.
Yeah, I guess so. Fair. Yeah. I guess the critical successes are usually the ones that get kind of the lower stuff.
Yeah. Even Goodfellas, which I actually think I skipped. Goodfellas 5th lowest at only $46 million. So, and I'll put this list up. Honestly. I'll put this list up on social media or something after the episode comes out, just so you all can actually visualize it. But yeah, it's wild. But you did not do terrible. So that was box office boogie.
Goddamn fucking the Departed will always be my dang white whale. Like, why is that the best grossing of all movies?
I think that was thing. And even though this was just a selection of his pieces, I think The Departed is his highest grossing of all of his released movies.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me.
The Irishman may have come close when it finally got theatrical, but the fact that it premiered on streaming really handicapped that number. But yeah, that was a segment, we'll say.
Well, that's a hell of a segment, bud.
Constantly, I've got other ideas on things to do in the future, and maybe we'll try some of those out as well. I figure if I can't think of a question, might as well make a game.
Yeah, go with me. I'm fine with that. Just playing that in the background because we don't know what else to do.
Oh well. Speaking of social media, I guess I can head into socials now.
Why not?
So go ahead and follow us on any of your favorite podcasting platforms. We're on the likes of Apple Podcasts, Google Play Podcast, Stitcher Premium, iHeartRadio, Podbay, Podomatic, YouTube. But we are hosted on Spotify for podcasters. Go ahead and rate and review us on all of those. Send us an email as well, theyremadeit@gmail.com, with suggestions on potential future episodes, ideas for how to improve the podcast, what you like, what you didn't like. If you just want to say hi, that's always welcome as well. And go ahead and follow us, theyremadeit.bluesky.social. We are no longer on X, but you can follow us. You can follow us on Blue Sky for updates on when podcasts are going live, things that we've been talking about recently or what we've been watching, playing, engaging with, future episodes that we might do, and also full circle diagrams, or maybe videos, regarding folks that we've talked about on the podcast more than once. I honestly haven't done a full circle in a while because I'm just trying to put together an asset that hopefully will improve on that formula. But yeah, follow us there for updates on all things They Remade It, and that is it for socials.
I do love Blue Sky and its simplicity and the significantly lower moral implications. It's so nice.
It's nice. It has a lot of nice engagement. It's starting to turn a little wild because of all the people that have been flocking from Twitter over to it.
Yeah.
So, which isn't great. Some of the things I've been seeing, but
yeah, I was gonna say it's like, you know, it does have the vibe of rats fleeing the sinking ship, but you know, it's like rats are survivors and not typically horrible. You know, it's mostly what's riding on their backs. There's a lot of metaphors I could be doing about like the stuff going on in our day to day. As always, I am your host Stuart,
and I am your host Jacob,
and I hope you all keep a lovely and safe evening. I'm going to take care of my dog now.
Ooh, I got the all-over fidgets on that one. You really shaking me up. I'm shivering all over. Woo. It's not necessary to lay a foul tongue on me, my friend. I could get upset. Things could get out of hand. And then in self-defense, I could do something to you that you would not like right here.
Anytime you feel squirrely, you just jump.
You threatening me? You threatening me?
You catch on fast.
Because I'm well within my rights to be here, and you know it. And if I stay here, what you gonna do?
I don't give a rat's ass about your rights. You just watch your step. And you know what I'm talking about.
What you gonna do, arrest me? You a cop, or were you a cop? Or were you not good enough to remain on the force? Because you know what, that's the feeling I'm getting here.